to have her here with us today at Meadowbrook Farm and to have brought her here in style. We all know her secret to longevity, a Manhattan before dinner and a pack of Marlboro Menthol 100s a day. And the aroma of horses. Another reason she is with us is because of the beautiful place across the street, West River Lodge.
Yay!
Yay! Let me tell you how she got here. Betty's sentimental journey to Vermont. I got most of this information from a series of interviews I did with the unsuspecting Betty over the last month. She's a very private person. I have known her for 45 years and much of this was news to me. Don't worry, Betty, I won't go into the lurid details. So this is Betty's sentimental journey to Vermont. Not without Bradley, of course. In May 1952, Betty, a Philadelphia mainline girl from Chestnut Hill, got a job in Brooklyn as assistant librarian at the American Machine and Foundry Company. Their research library was attached to their patent department, where the young attorney, J. Bradley Cohn, was a good friend of the librarian. He had to pass Betty's desk to talk to her boss. He would stop in between and talk to both of us, Betty said. He was in and out frequently. You know what a talker he was. And then we got talking horse, she said. I don't know how that happened. Their first date was on Bastille Day, July 14th, a dinner date in the West Village, where Betty had sublet an apartment for the summer. Once she took him to see the Devon Horse Show. He took her to Seagirt, New Jersey, where he grew up. One day in August '52, a colleague of Bradley's showed him an ad he'd seen in the New York Times. Come to Vermont. Golf, hike, ride horses. Bradley gave the ad to Betty and said, why don't you write to this tourist board? Maybe we can ride from inn to inn. Neither had ever been to Vermont before. Betty wrote back and got several glossy colored brochures and one letter typed with green typewriter ribbon on white paper from West River Lodge. Betty showed them all to Bradley, but she liked the typewritten one best because of the way the woman spoke about their horses. They reserved 2 rooms for 5 days in the 3rd week of September. They drove up, arrived in a rainstorm, and were shown to their rooms. Not in the house, but in 2 rustic cabins on the hill, without showers. Betty got a large cabin with 2 rooms and a sink, but Bradley got a lonely cabin with no plumbing, and he had to walk through the rain to wash up. He was miserable. They said goodnight. Next morning was a glorious September day. They'd got enough rain that the tree trunks were all black. Betty remembers these marvelous details. She got into riding clothes, started down the hill, and smelled the bacon. When Bradley still hadn't arrived, she headed back up the hill to find him. They met on the path in the pines. He was in his street clothes. I'm not staying here, he said. This is terrible. That's why you're not in your riding clothes? She asks. Yes, we're leaving right after breakfast. The next thing she said changed all of our lives. I'm not leaving. There are horses down there and I'm going to ride. Okay, Bradley said. So while they were eating breakfast, George Ware was saddling a pair of Grade Morgans, Chick and his sister Princess. Then George came in and said the magic words, your horses are ready. George had the cook pack a lunch in their saddlebags and they said they could ride all day. He handed Bradley the trail map and off they went, down the Pent Road, turned left on Route 30 and rode into Newfane. So that was the very beginning. Betty married Bradley in Philadelphia on May 15, 1954. The next year they came back to West River Camp for a week of riding in early October and their first 3-day foliage ride. We went back almost every year for spring and fall trail ride, Betty said. She missed 1957 spring ride because she'd fractured her spine, but she came up later that summer in a body cast to see her first New Brook Horse Show. The next year she went back to the show. When George Ware's horse show secretary walked out on him at noon, desperate, he seized on Betty to do the job. You can do it, he told her. So I went over, sat down, and did it. And then she did it for 48 more years. Betty said, when I think about it, it sounds absolutely ridiculous. This year she retired as show secretary, but still acts as its treasurer. In '58, the Cohns had bought a plane and were flying up every weekend. For a couple of years, they flew their parakeet up with them. One weekend in '62, they flew up with me, the 9-year-old horse-crazed daughter of the mechanic in New Jersey who fixed Bradley's old beater cars. The Cohns stayed on as regular guests when George sold the place to a couple from Connecticut, then later when it was run by Julie and Joe Nichols. In the summer of '65, the Cohns broke down and bought West River Lodge from the Engleharts. Then, for 18 years, Betty ran the house and Bradley the barn. For a group of us, they were the best years of our lives.
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah.
Betty gave me my first job when I was 13, and I worked there every summer but one, from 8th grade through college. On Betty's watch, trail ride fall luncheons were served on dining room china. I was 19 when my first story was published in Vermont Life magazine, and it was about Betty's West River Lodge. A happy start to my writing career. For a few years, Lucille Bump was resident riding instructress. For several summers, she put together a drill team of local riders who provided the lunchtime entertainment at the Newbrook Horse Show. Sometimes Sally Swift would come over and test her theories on us during our practice runs. She later wrote the book, Centered Riding, a modern classic in equitation literature. Sally Swift is with us today. Lucille Bump could not be here because she's in Austria teaching the Austrians how to ride. Centered riding. Betty bought Sir Lancelot, a curious chestnut Morgan gelding, in August 1960. In 1963, Bradley bought Littman Hawk, who won the Justin Morgan performance class at the National and retired the George Goebel Cup for winning the trotting race 3 years in a row. For their first New Year's as owners of the lodge, Betty and Bradley threw an open house party that continues to this day with some of the same guests 42 years later.
Yay!
People drank and chattered in front of the living room fireplace, listened to the radio for Guy Lombardo's countdown. 15 minutes before midnight, Bradley decided the horses ought to come in.
Right.
He went out and haltered Lance, led him up the porch steps, through the screen door, through the office, and into the living room, where he stood calmly munching a carrot, taking in the scene. Hawkie went instead to the kitchen, where he drank from his silver trophy cup. Betty went everywhere on Lance. Once the fall trail riders went to Westminster West, 22 miles round trip. It was glorious, magnificent, Betty said. So beautiful, she and Lance went back and did it on their own for the hell of it. The Cohns added new school horses to the barn, and in December '75 advertised for a barn manager. Roger Poitras showed up. And he set off on his own brilliant career as a respected riding instructor and horse trainer. In July '83, the Cohns sold the lodge to Jack and Jillian Winter and gave their school horses to Roger, who eventually moved across the street, moved West River Stables across the street. And that was good, because Betty Cohn continued to ride into her 80s, and she still keeps her Morgans here at age 90 and a day. Leaving right after breakfast indeed, Bradley. Betty, thanks for putting your foot down. Many happy returns. Many happy returns, Betty. Thanks for all the interviews. Thanks for you, for being you.
Thank you.